Alright, pre-AP, we've talked about the intro to ecology. Now we're moving on to population ecology. I'm coming to you live from my kitchen, and my dog Ralph is going to help me make this video. So, let's first make sure that we have a highlighter, some type of writing utensil, and your outline, because we're going to annotate this good old outline. So, let's start at the beginning. Please go ahead and population ecology. Highlight it. And let's make sure that we know what it deals with. Please highlight it. It deals with species population and the population's environment. The things that are going to affect the size and the health of the population. So, just to make sure we got this, please highlight. Population is the same species. If you look at this picture, this is the same species of butterfly. They're all monarch butterflies. And they actually have a very specific migration pattern, and a lot of people like to study them. They have had the same migration pattern for probably hundreds, if thousands of years. They migrate, and you can actually look this up. It's pretty fascinating. They go to the same places in the winter and then migrate back to their original place in the summer. So you might want to go look that up. If we're talking specifically about the human population, they are predicting, if we look at this beautiful graph, the last census where you actually collect information about the population of the earth, they usually do it every 10 years or so. For the United States, it's every 10 years. By the time that we reach 2030, they're predicting that our population is going to be 8 billion. Billion with a B. Right now, as of 2010, we actually had 7 billion people. Who knows? We might even surpass that 8 billion. Who knows? So, if we're going to look at populations, we're going to look at two big things. We're going to look at the population density. Let's highlight that. Density is the number of organisms in that given area. And the boundaries. Boundaries are natural boundaries, such as a mountain range, a body of water. Things that allow that population to know, okay, we start here, and we're probably not going to go past this point. Now, please also highlight, there can be man-made boundaries. Or, like I just mentioned, those mountain ranges, those bodies of water, you could have natural boundaries. And then the other thing that we'll look at with populations is dispersion. So please highlight that dispersion is where, within the boundaries, where within that mountain range and that body of water is that population going to exist? Where are they going to be located? And there are dispersion patterns. Sorry guys, that was a text message. My bad. I'm turning my volume off right now. I'm sorry. Alright, so our two types of dispersion patterns. I gave you 3 little boxes on your outline, so let's fill those in. So the first one we'll talk about is a clumped dispersion pattern. So please highlight that a clumped dispersion pattern, please highlight it usually results from the need for nutrients, mating, or if you are a human being, employment. So let's look at this. Clumped, please put you a star out beside there. This is actually the most common type. If you are in a clump dispersion pattern, this is what you'll draw on the box right here, in my little box. Clumped is the most common. Why? If you look at this, if you grouped all these fish together, they're the same species, by the way. Let's put some examples out beside here. That way, just before I forget, I'll mention them and then I'll forget to write them down. If you think about, what is a group of fish called? That's right, it's called a school. So, these could be things like schools of fish, This could be a herd. This could be a pack. Or if you're geese, it could be a gaggle. So these are animals that like to stay in groups. So if you want to put another star, these are group animals. Or, don't forget plants. So these are things that like to stay together. Why? Well, most of the time the offspring like to be near their parents. Or maybe all their nutrients are right there. Or they don't want to have to wander far to find a mate to be able to determine, okay, I need a mate. I need to make sure that I spread my genetics onto the next generation because that's important. So those are pack animals or group animals. The second type we're going to talk about is uniform. And this is what you'll draw in the box. Please highlight or underline either one. Uniform, sometimes these are called evenly dispersion patterns. Please highlight, it usually results from territorial or favorable environment. These are penguins. So go ahead, put you an example out beside there. Penguins, or sometimes if you look at tree farms, that's a man-made one. But these are evenly spaced inside a territory for penguins. These are penguins from south of us, Antarctica. If you've ever seen the movie Happy Feet, those are those penguins. They like to stay in their one little spot. They have their one small spot that they like to stay. Female penguins build their nest. And everyone knows, look, that's so-and-so's nest. You don't go over there. You have your space, I have my space. Then the last one is random. Put yourself a star. This is the most rare. The most rare kind. And then this is what you'll draw in the box. And just like you would think, random means random. Please highlight that there is no apparent reason. It's random. Whenever somebody does something random, it's random. So highlight that there's no apparent reason seen for the dispersion patterns. Now, what an example of this would be, possibly, that could cause this. There's no apparent reason, but if we could hypothesize, guess a reason, would be seed dispersal from plants. Maybe that plant is kind of like, those helicopters that you see. Those are maple leaf seeds. And they have that little whirly on the end. And the wind catches a hold of it and it blows it somewhere far away. And it just randomly got planted in the ground there. That would be an example of that. Alright, so demography. So please highlight that this is the study of population sizes and distribution. Now, some things that you would look at are why a population would grow or why it would not grow. It would decrease, increase, decrease. Let's look at this. So let's highlight growth. This is going to either occur from an increase in births or immigration, meaning you moved into an area. Now a decline, a decrease, would be either by death of individuals inside that population or by immigration. You're exiting. Maybe, if you think about the Lion King, whenever at the end, whenever Simba's mama tells Scar, hey, we have two choices. There's no food. We can't find any food. We're going to have to leave Pride Rock. And Scar says, no, you're not. We're not going anywhere. That would be immigration. It's usually because you've ran out of a resource. Maybe, your watering hole dried up. Something happened. And so how we look at ages inside of a population, the number of deaths, the number of births, maybe how many individuals have immigrated into that population, how many have immigrated left. And we kind of have to see why. So this is what we look at. They are things to show us life tables. So please highlight that life tables provide age-specific traits for cohorts, meaning individuals that are the same age. You're a demographic. You are between, a certain age range. Sometimes they do an age range from 10 to 20. That's a demographic. Also, these are very expensive, guys, and they're really time consuming. So please highlight, these are like the U.S. Census. Those are done every 10 years, and we like to see how many deaths have occurred during a certain amount of time. So in this one, you're actually looking at ground squirrels, if you read the title. And they didn't really, give us a certain, it's in a book. It's from a book from 1984. So what it does is the demographic is the age range, and then we look at how many are alive at the start of the year, how many are alive in proportion to the ones that are, proportion. Then they're going to look at the number of deaths during that year. What's the death rate, meaning what's the proportion of death to alive, and then the life expectancy. What's the average life of this ground squirrel? And this is, they mainly split it up into males and females to see, hey, what gender of squirrels, lives the longest. And again, if we look at these, if you read this, at the beginning of the year, they started off with 337 females and 349 males. At the end of the year, they had 207 females and they had 227 males. Now, there is no, there's no reason why. This table doesn't tell us, specifically why those squirrels died, but it gives us numbers. This is quantitative data, not qualitative. So life expectancy of a female and a male, relatively about the same, a little over a year. So that's a life table. The other thing you could look at is a survivorship curve. Please highlight there are 3 types. There is type 1, and I gave you a similar good old picture on yours. But let's see what the deal is. So survivorship curve, number 1. We're going to put some examples out beside there. Example for survivorship curve type 1 is going to be humans. We are a type 1. Go us. So let's highlight why that is. Well, what does that mean, Miss Bonner? Like, you're just showing me a graph. I don't know what it means. So let's highlight. Please highlight that this has many young in it, numerous middle, and a few old. And then you got to think about what type of environment does that mean. So let's highlight. This environment favors the young and usually indicates that the environment is favorable and the organism is usually at the top of the food chain. Also highlight that it has extensive parental care and energy investment. Humans take care of their babies. We have a lot of young, but then as we get closer to 100, the population is going to start declining because people are passing away. Now, that means that we have a long life expectancy. It takes a long time because of health care, because of, better hygiene. We're living longer. Now, type 2, please highlight it's a constant decline. Why? Please highlight that it's relatively favorable, but the organism may be a food source for another organism. And parental care is modest. It's somewhere in the middle. An example for that would be a squirrel. Now, squirrels can have, depending on the squirrel, of course, they're going to have more than one at a time. And they take pretty good care of their babies, but after a certain age, they're going to say, bye-bye, babies. You got to go find your own way. And then, again, think about all the things that eat squirrels. Coyotes, bears, wolves. So it's usually a food source. And then type 3, I know this one says, you know, on the picture it's a clam. But for us, on your picture, it's a frog. So for your example, please put frog. Because frog makes a little bit more sense. And I'll explain why. So let's highlight first. Type 3, please highlight. It indicates a harsh environment because most of the population dies at an early age. You start off here, the numbers slowly go down before you even reach 50 years old. There are very few frogs that live to be 50 years old. Why? Because it indicates that they are a food source that is low on the food chain. Frogs sure are. Lots of things eat frogs. As well as they practically have no parental investment. The young are pretty much left to fend for themselves. If you're a frog, you have thousands upon thousands of teeny tiny little bitty dot looking eggs. You lay them in a kind of jelly formation inside the water. Whenever you lay your eggs, you don't look over them. You don't watch over them. You don't make sure that all of them hatch. Now there are several fish that love to eat frog eggs. Snakes love to eat frog eggs. And then maybe from those 1,000, maybe 100 make it to birth. And whenever they birth, of course, remember, frogs are baby tadpoles. Their babies are tadpoles. A lot of things love to eat tadpoles. So maybe 75 of them actually make it to adulthood. And then remember, a lot of animals like to eat adult frogs. That's why they are a survivorship curve type 3. They are a really big food source. So those are survivorship curves. A lot of it deals with parental investment. Do you take care of your babies? If you take really good care of your babies will be able to reach adulthood. They will be able to find a mate, reproduce, and keep on that lineage, that nice number in that population. Alright, so let's move on to part 2. So flip over. These are going to be population growth models, meaning some quantitative data on how populations are measured. So let's look at our population growth models. So the first type is exponential growth. Now please highlight that this is ideal growth. And what type of species does this involve? This, please highlight, is an R-selected species. R, think rapid growth. These are populations that grow super fast. You'll also hear them called density independent. Why? Highlight their population size. Their number is related to their resources, not the number of organisms. It depends on, do I have enough food? Do I have enough water? Do I have enough? What do I have? Please highlight that it makes a J-shaped curve. If we look at this, I put one on your notes. If you notice, it begins, it's kind of slow, starts off at 0 and zoom, skyrockets upward. Now this is ideal growth. Why? Because you're growing exponentially. You're just growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. You have everything you need. So, of course, highlight, you have unlimited resources. But this is not very common. Remember, life is not perfect. So please highlight that these are mainly in new environments. They're pioneer species. These are things like bacteria, lichens. Those are those fuzzy green things that grow on trees. And mosses. Why? Because they're the first organism to colonize an environment. An example, again, exponential growth before I get to my example. Start off at 0, skyrocket up. So this example would be bacteria because it's cell number. So our example is going to be Hawaii. So Hawaii is an island. Islands form whenever there is usually a volcano underneath the ocean. and it erupts enough that you get a small piece of land that sits above the surface of the ocean. So over time, lichens and mosses, pioneer species, began to colonize. They moved in, there was nothing there. Well, if there's nothing there, they don't have to compete with anything, so they just kept growing and growing and growing. And then over time, some grasses moved in because they didn't have any competition. And then over time, there were some shrubs and some little bitty trees that kind of started to show up because there was room for them. Which eventually, there's Hawaii. Has a lot of different species of trees, plants, like shrubs, and animals. Please also highlight before we move on, this is intrinsic growth, which means just a fancy way of saying that the population is growing as fast as possible. It's doubling. That's why that curve goes straight up. And then the more realistic growth is logistical growth. Please highlight that these are K-selected species. These are things like us, everything other than bacteria. So why do we have that K in there? It has nothing to do with logistical growth. Please highlight that K, it's like a variable. It represents something. It represents carrying capacity. Carrying capacity, please write down somewhere that it is the number of individuals a population can support. Now they are going to be able to support that number before something runs out, like food, water, space. So that's carrying capacity. That's why we have that K. And you will also hear this type, K-selected species. Please highlight that these are density dependent. What does that mean? Please highlight that the species number, they're about the number of organisms in a given area because of limited resources. Realistically, you don't have all the food, the water, and the space you need if you're just an everyday animal. Now, if you're a human, you create those things for yourself. If you're a normal animal, you can't do that. That is why they are near carrying capacity for their environment. Just like the picture I've given you, it makes an S curve. Let me get my highlighter. It starts off, it begins to grow, and then you finally reach carrying capacity, which is this line right here. We just usually represent it with K. This is usually the number that your environment can support, and you're going to want to stay there. Sometimes you'll go a little above, sometimes you'll go a little below. But you want to reach at carrying capacity. You want to keep right there. You might fluctuate a little bit. So please also highlight, because your environment has limited resources, that's why you got to stay around K. Because if you have more organisms than your environment can handle, that means damage will be done. Also highlight that damage done to the environment can cause the carrying capacity to drop. You're going to run out of food. You're going to run out of space. That means that the number that environment can support will drop. So please highlight the things that could cause this would be things like war, disease, famine breakout, because that will cause the population to bring that number down below K, below carrying capacity. And please highlight what lag time is. Lag time is the time to begin to see these effects. Usually, you're not going to measure how this affects the environment. You know, if the line goes above K, then that means that something has happened. Please also, before I forget, density dependent is mostly living things. These are factors that influence your population size. So density dependent Factors are mostly living. Those are things like competing for food. Predators, somebody's going to eat something. Prey, you're the thing getting eaten. Food, disease. And then density independent factors are mostly non-living. Have you had a lot of sunlight? What's that going to mostly affect, animals or plants? Soil nutrients, wind. Have you gotten a lot of rain? So those are our growth patterns. And we'll actually do an activity that demonstrates this. So part 3, last part. So boom and bust cycles, I have given you one, the snowshoe hare. This is a cute little white bunny rabbit, and a lynx. So please highlight that this is about a predator-prey relationship. Think about who's the predator. It's probably going to be the lynx, and I'll show you a picture of him in a minute. He's the predator, snowshoe hare, cute little bunny rabbit, he's the prey. Now, what all this means is, these two populations are influencing one another. As the number of lynx go up, what do you notice happening to the number of, as the snowshoe hare goes up, what do you notice about the lynx? What's going up? Well, why? Well, the lynx have something to eat. And then if all the snowshoe hares are getting eaten, their population's going to decrease. Well, then the lynx is going to run out of food, so it's going to decrease. Well, there's nothing to eat my bunny rabbits, my snowshoe hares, so boom, they're going to increase. Well, hey, the lynx are like, man, food again. They're going to increase. And there's this boom. So on your graph, please put that this is the boom. And then down here, wherever you have a very sinking dip, this is the bust. So this is a predator-prey relationship. As one population increases, the other one will increase. Well, if you run out of food, you're going to decrease. You're the lynx. If you're a snowshoe hare, you're going to decrease because you're being eaten. So no matter what, if your snowshoe hare goes up, so is your lynx. All the bunny rabbits are getting eaten. The lynx run out of food, they're going to go down. And it's just going to continuously go this way. So here's the snowshoe hare and the lynx. Cute little Arctic bunny rabbit. And the lynx is kind of like a bobcat. And as you can see, this is the boom and bust cycle right in front of your eyes. Prey and predator. So human growth on the earth. So remember, there are some things that can influence human growth on the earth. Remember, there are things like disease. Back in the Middle Ages, there was actually the plague. The plague was from a bacteria that went through and wiped out half of the population of Europe. And it was terrible. So, remember, whenever you are mainly humans, we affect the environment pretty much more than any other population in the world. And we actually leave behind an ecological footprint. So if you look at this graph, these are various countries, their footprint. Your footprint can be by how much you travel. Pretty much how much carbon are you letting into the air. So if you look above the line, meaning over here, this is bad. You have a bad carbon footprint. You are not helping the environment. Unfortunately, this is us. But we are kind of implementing some things that are going to help us not have such a terrible effect on the environment. Everything below the line over here, you've got a good footprint. You're not doing too much damage. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for population ecology, and Community ecology will be the next video. I hope that was helpful.